Hi, and welcome back to the How to Research lecture series. Today's lesson will be on academia and the publication process. So, the first thing to get out of the way are what different academic titles mean. This is important since you'll often see them in academic papers, so you should at the very least understand the differences between these positions. So, starting on the student side of things, a PhD candidate is somebody who's finished their coursework and is working on their thesis or dissertation for grad school. A JD candidate is distinct from a PhD candidate because they're in law school. Now, moving on to the professor side of academia, there are four important positions that I saw a lot in different academic articles I read when I did high school debate. The first was assistant professor. This is basically the entry position for somebody who wants to attain tenure. That's tenure. Tenure is where professors get an appointment inside of a university and they can't be fired for any reason other than extreme circumstances. Tenure is really coveted in academia, and people often aim to try and attain tenure because it's a very secure position. You're guaranteed a job, basically. So assistant is the entry-level position, and once you end up getting tenure, then you're promoted to associate professor. And this is usually somebody who's tenured, and it's basically just a level up from assistant. After that, you become a professor, which is kind of where people want to end up when they attain tenure. They want to become a full professor. So, other than special distinctions, a professor is the highest position that somebody on the tenure track can attain. So, what's an important special distinction? Emerita professor. And this is somebody who's retired but still gets office space. Essentially, they're still affiliated with the university, but they don't have teaching responsibilities. Oftentimes, they just do research or write papers. There are a couple of other special or distinguished positions that I won't go over. I think emerita is the most relevant since I saw the most amount of articles written by emerita professors when I was doing research in high school. But feel free to look up other distinguished or special positions that are higher than professor in academia and educate yourself a little more on what different titles mean. So these are other titles that are not on the tenure track but are still important for you to know. The first one is a visiting professor. They're usually somebody from another university who have been temporarily invited to teach, usually for a semester or two, and they're teaching a specific class, or they're doing research at that institution. Adjunct professors are oftentimes public policy or government officials who only teach part-time. They can teach as many classes or as little classes as they want, and they're really just there to add more to the university in the experience as opposed to being a part of the full-time staff. The next thing that we should discuss is peer review. This is probably the most important thing to determining whether an article is credible. So what is peer review? Peer review is a process that articles go through when they are submitted to journals. This is to make sure that the articles are rigorously interrogated and don't have any flaws within them. So to walk you through the peer review process, the first step is you want to send your article to a journal. So this is fairly simple. You just write the article and send it to a journal. The second part of the peer review process is the journal editor will screen your article. If they say it's good, then we'll move on to part 3, but if they don't like it, then it gets rejected and it won't be published in that journal. Clearly, you can start to see how this is only the beginning step, but it's a rigorous process for evaluating how good articles are. So let's say the journal editor says yes. Then the third step is peer reviewers, so people who are experts in the field, just like you, will comment on the article. And there are two key components to this. The first one is the number of reviewers is super relevant. The more reviewers you have looking at your article, the better it's going to be and the more rigorously it's going to be evaluated. And the way that you tell how many viewers there are is usually only by looking at the journal's frequently asked questions or by emailing the journal itself. This is not usually a step high school debaters take when evaluating their articles, but if you are interested in peer review and want to see how good is your article actually and want more to add in your rebuttal speeches for why your article is better than your opponent's, this can oftentimes be a crucial step that'll make the difference between a meh piece of evidence and a really brilliant piece of evidence. The fourth part of peer review is after the reviewers make comments, The editor is going to look at those comments and decide to do one of three things. They can either accept the article, they can reject the article, or most commonly, they'll get the editor to revise the article. And at that point, once the editor has to revise the article, then we move on to step 5. If the author is made to revise their article, then they'll submit their revisions once more, the editor will look at their revisions, and the editor can either decide to accept the article as is, or send it once more back through the peer review wheel, and then have the author make edits once again. Then finally, part 6 would be acceptance. And this is just when the article gets accepted into the journal itself. A key component of acceptance is the rate of acceptance into a journal and the number of submissions. Anything below 10% means a journal is extremely prestigious and it's very hard to get accepted into that journal. An example of this is Nature, which is considered the gold standard science academic journal. It has a 7.7% acceptance rate from over 50,000 annual submissions, which is absolutely absurd and means that your article needs to be the best of the best in order to be accepted into that journal. One of the key things that you need to be aware of is recently there have been a lot more predatory or pseudo journals that have been increasing in their prevalence in academia. These journals do not conduct peer review in the way I described it. They only mimic the process. And you can determine what these journals are because typically their primary motive is profit. And they often ask authors to pay hefty fees in order to have their articles submitted into the journal, which is out of the ordinary. One of the resources you can use to try and figure out if something is a credible journal is DOAJ.org. They've created a DOAJ seal for journals that they deem legitimate. This is not a comprehensive list, but it'll give you a good idea if your journal is on the list that it is very credible. So what we'll do as an exercise is we'll continue using the immigration resolution, which is resolved the United States federal government should substantially reduce its restrictions on legal immigration to the United States. For the exercise, you should find one article related to the resolution that was published in journals and assess its reliability. So for the instructions, I want you to make sure to do two things. First, I want you to check its peer review process, and then second, I want you to check its acceptance rate. Finally, check with the DOAJ to see if it's on the list. Remember, the list isn't comprehensive, but it's a good sign if your journal is on the list. So pause the video, take a few minutes to go do this exercise, and then come back when you're ready. Welcome back. Hopefully that wasn't too hard, but what we're going to do now is look at an article that I found and see the process that I went through to determine how rigorous was its review. So you can either type in the URL above, or I'll show you the title of the article in a second. It's from the Ethics Journal at the University of Chicago Press. So once you have the URL typed in, pause the video, or wait 1 second and I will show you the title of the article, which is Can Brain Drain Justify Immigration Restrictions? So pause the video now, get this open, and try and figure out, first, what is its peer review process like, and second, what is its acceptance rate? Welcome back, everyone. So we're going to take a look at what was the peer review process of this article and what's the acceptance rate of the journal. So we can see that the source is Ethics, which is the name of the journal, and it's from the University of Chicago Press. Don't worry if you didn't have access to the actual article itself. If you just saw it on JSTOR or saw it somewhere else, you would still be able to find these two things. So what we're going to do is we're going to start out by going to the University of Chicago Press, which you can find by just typing it into Google and then clicking on the first link that pops up. We're going to look at the place where it says journals. We can then go to the E section because we know our journal is called Ethics and look for it, and it appears right here. So we're going to click on this and it'll take us to the Ethics Journal homepage. So now we know this is where all of the information's at. Immediately, two things stand out to me where I might be able to find out information about the peer review process. The first place is on contributors. Instructions for authors is most likely to have that, so I'm going to open that in a new tab. Then, in the About section, I can see there's an editorial board and a Contact the Editorial Office. So in case I can't find the information on the website, I'll contact the editorial office, and the editorial board is helpful since I know the people who are peer reviewing the process. So, We'll start out by looking at the Information for Authors section. There are a couple of different links that it can take you to. Immediately, the one that stands out to me is what to expect after submission. Presumably after submission, it'll go through a peer-reviewed process. So I click on this link, and it says already right here at the top that there's a review procedure. So we can see that they are anonymized and that roughly half the submissions are rejected without comments at that point, which already indicates that it probably has a pretty good acceptance rate since roughly half were submitted without even having any review process gone through. Then we can look at the original articles. We can see that they are sent for double-blind review to 2 outside reviewers, and that if they receive 2 reject recommendations by outside reviewers, then they're rejected. We can also see that the acceptance rate for articles is about 4%, which already indicates that it's a very, very good journal. We can go further and keep looking at this. I'll let you look at it on your own time, but clearly this article has a rigorous peer review process. Another good indication is that it's from a reputable university press, and the press has been around for a really long time, so it's probably got a good reputation by now. So why is all of this relevant? The first reason why it's relevant is because of evidence comparison, and the way that comes into play is because of the second reason, which is evidence qualifications. So you want your evidence to be as qualified as possible, since the judge is more likely to believe a piece of evidence from a really qualified author than from a not so qualified author. A lot of times people are reading articles in debate that haven't gone through any peer review process whatsoever. Peer review is super important since it means that the article has been tested by many people, that its methodology is sound, and that the conclusions that it drew are actually justified by the results found from the study. People make mistakes when writing articles all the time. That's why peer review exists, to make sure that the articles are good enough to be read by the general public and seen as really qualified. Peer review should be your highest standard for whether an article is good. Not all of your articles need to be peer reviewed, but if you do find one that's peer reviewed, know that it's going to be significantly better than your opponent's. Additionally, judges are going to be extremely impressed if you can explain the peer review process, how rigorous the journal is, and you can weigh that against what your opponent's evidence is like. That's going to boost your speaker points, and it's also going to make you more likely to win close rounds that are decided by how good your evidence is. Thank you for watching, and I hope this was helpful.